gradual journey into Cabernet Sauvignon magnificence. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Big and Pay. And welcome to Melrose Arch, or more specifically the Marriott at Melrose Arch, where I find myself for this week's show. And I find myself in a cellar. Now, what you can't see is that just behind the camera are about 8 rather large members of security watching me rather closely. I think they think I might try and go off with some of their wine. And given what is surrounding me, I probably would give it a go if they weren't nearby. There's some Shannon Mount Bullet sitting just to my left. There's finer Merlot as South Africa has, a pile of Peter Allen Philistons Crystallum sitting over in the corner, and some Neil Ellis tucked over down to my side. But on this particularly cold Johannesburg night, looks like a really, really good option. Collectively, it's a wonderful selection of wine at one of the newer hotels in Johannesburg, and a hotel that has picked up an area once again just seeing so much more life. The Grill House just across the road, one of my regular haunts, is really busy, and it's lovely to see South Africans out and about eating and enjoying themselves, and as I've seen this evening, loads of tourists back in South Africa and enjoying this fine hotel, which I'm going to be exploring a little during the course of the show, but that's not all I'll be doing. I'll be heading across to the other side of Johannesburg, over to Rosebank and the Shortmarket Club, where I try out the wines of Radford Dale. But first of all, I'm heading down to Stellenbosch, and one of my very favourite people in the wine industry. She was with Graham Beck for many years, took the plunge to go out on her own a few years ago, and was rewarded almost instantly with Platter's New Winery of the Year. She is Erika Obermeyer. She's got a brand new home in Stellenbosch, and I was lucky enough to get a personal guided tour. One of the South African wine stories that's given me most joy over the last few years has been the journey of Erika Obermeyer, from leaving Graham Beck to going out on her own, becoming the Platter New Winery of the Year, to now finally finding her own home. Erika!
Hi Dan! Good to see you.
So excited. I remember you told me on the phone last year you found your home, and we've spoken about this a number of times, and now we're here.
Yeah, it's still, I have to pinch myself.
Yeah.
It's my first vintage. I think I pretty much start from scratch. It's been seven years of moving my stock every single vintage, a new cellar, walking into a new space just before harvest, and just pretend that you walk into a war zone and not knowing what's going to happen. But yeah, it turned out very well. But you know, you appreciate things in life when you have to wait for it, and timing is everything. So I'm extremely excited, and what a vintage to celebrate it with.
Now, you say wait for things. I think that's not entirely true, because your story has gone so quickly from where you were at Graham Beck to where you are now. This is the latest chapter. I know it probably feels like it's taken an age, but I think for the rest of the world watching on, this roller coaster ride of yours has been extraordinary.
Yes, I've been really blessed. I think, as you say, success takes years in the making. And often what happens behind the scenes don't always seems real to the outside. But yeah, it's been an incredible journey. And I'm really grateful for all the challenges, because I think when you working with nature really makes you respect life, the challenges, and it makes you think outside of the box. So I've certainly learned a lot in the last years since I moved from Graham Beck. It happened quite quickly, yes, but a year goes past so quickly. But yeah, it's been incredible. There's been days where I thought, like, I don't know whether I'll be seeing another vintage, because it was really hard at some point. Being a very almost looking for perfection, that sometimes gets in the way. Wanting to do things your own way, but yeah, it learned me valuable lessons in winemaking, that as long as you work with incredible fruit, when you're very, very dedicated and passionate about what you do, and you put in the hard work, it always rewards you with beautiful success. So yeah, I'm just happy to be in my own space, being able to do things the way that I really want to do it, having all this fancy tools of perfect cooling and clean cellar, and yeah, being able to, I'm looking forward to dive into the new chapter and explore new ways of doing things, and hopefully bring that across in my wines.
We're going to explore the space in just a moment, but before we do that, why was it so important for you to have your own home, and how does the game change for you now that you've got your own HQ?
Yeah, as I said, I'm a perfectionist in the sense that I think wine is not forgiving at all. Nature doesn't forgive. It's also never stops. We saw that during COVID, that the whole world went to a shutdown, and life just continued outside. So the vintage didn't wait for anybody. We had to rush and get things into barrel. But yeah, for me, it's always been that full circle of bringing fruit in. I'm privileged to work with some of the incredible vineyards, some of the best people in the industry, and having to showcase that in my wine. But now I've got that extra benefit of bringing people in. The brand is really to connect with people, and I've said it since day one, that I've had the very commercial life at Grainbeck. I was fortunate to travel the world and taste in New York, and then the next week I will be in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, and that was incredible. But since I started Erika Obermeyer Wines, I said I want to now do the next thing. What's next? It's to take the wine to the person in the glass and to share that story. And hopefully within the next 1 or 2 months we can open this space to public on appointment only, because I'll be doing the tastings myself, and I want people to really come here and experience what wine and fine wine is all about, to take them out to these vineyards, these special vineyards, and really make the story, that full circle of bringing what we all see in marketing material into your glass, and having that experience. And the best part of wine for me is always to share it with people and to see the joy, to see how they love sharing that memories and that moments of a great wine. It's not only a product, it's so much more of memories from the vineyard. I mean, literally 3 weeks ago, I bottled my 2019 Cabernet only. So it takes a long time for a wine to evolve into what it is, and to share that with people. So yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing that with everyone.
Well, I'm very honoured then, because I'm getting a sneak preview of that experience. Can we go and have a look around?
Yes, let's take a glass and taste some of the juice from Tank also.
Perfect.
This is wine already, so it's our Syrah that is from Grove area. So really cool climate. You can taste a little bit of the white pepper coming through, blueberries, fresh berries like cranberry. There's obviously a lot of cherry, that chocolatey flavor that you get from fermentation. But these tanks are amazing. First of all, they're tiny enough so that I can get into them and do my punch downs, and not too big, but yeah, they really play a big role in the sense that it's conal, so your skins will go to the top and not as wide as at the bottom, so it kind of compresses the skins together, so you get a much bigger penetration of your skins into the juice. Now we put them to barrel in the next 2 months. You forget about them and you continue to work with your previous vintage, and you need to remember what you've tasted throughout the life of that wine to really bring forward that special characteristics in your final wine. This year I've worked with the most incredible fruit. So sometimes it's quite hard to get a little ton or two from these top vineyards, and I just persevered. I knocked on the door every single year, and this year I got to work with the most incredible 1954 planting of Cinsault, 1974 planting of Chenin Blanc, really amazing Cabernet. That's the toughest thing to find in the industry, is leaf roll, virus-free Cabernet Sauvignon from Stellenbosch, and I'm happy to say that we work with clean fruit, and it makes an important thing in the whole winemaking is that when you work with the best fruit, it's really easy to make great wine. You just need to nurture it through the cellar. But yeah, I go around the Western Cape and I visit these farmers, and you walk onto a property and it connects to your soul. And I always say the best part of winemaking is to get that conversation from the vineyard going. The vineyard will tell you exactly how to be treated, and if you can stay true to that, you will make phenomenal wines. And that's been my I think hidden secret, is to let the vineyards talk.
I am an unashamed Erika Obermeyer fan, and I think from there you can see why. Not only is she continuing to make wine that's littered with 5-star accolades from Plata, amongst many others, she's also making some wine with me and my family in memory of our dog Stavros. You might have seen the piece we did earlier this year with some of the winemakers who've said goodbye to dogs over the years. It was a rather emotional piece, but Erika has joined up and we did something really cool with the family. So give me a couple of years, I'll be able to introduce you to the barrel of the Stavros and the memories that come with it. I'll be making some memories with the wine list from this hotel if you come and visit. I love the fact that there are some varietals that we're seeing growing in South Africa. Saw some of the Cabernet Franc from Radford, which is here. There's also some really old Canon Cops and 2003 Cabernet Sauvignon in the cellar. So the chance to show the international tourist who you'd imagine will be quite a big chunk of the kind of person who comes to visit this hotel in the heart of Melrose Arch, the diversity and the history of South African wine. So if you do drop by, ask them to look off the wine list and find some of those other gems which will give you a great wine reward. Speaking of wine rewards, I had the opportunity to get some at the Shortmarket Club a few weeks ago. Radford Dale is an estate that, amongst other things, was right behind the Rescue Restaurant project, one we supported as Dan Really Likes Wine in a very small way, but really loved seeing as the wine world really tried to help out their food counterparts. And so we thought we'd drop in at a restaurant, try some of the new vintages, and raise a glass to Radford Dale. Welcome back to the Shortmarket. We're spending rather a lot of time here at the moment on Dan Really Likes Wine. Very happily so, because the menu Luke Dale Roberts has put together, it's kind of a blend of the Shortmarket as it was in Cape Town, with a very strong suggestion of the potluck club, the Asian flavors, and the result, well, the result is pretty good. And it's a result that's accentuated by some great wine, and that's exactly what we're jumping into today, with some wine I haven't had before, which is quite unusual. It is, I think, Vinum. Let's find out. Tom Pryor, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan. Cheers. Yeah, it's Radford Dale Vinum.
All right, so Vinum. What is Vinum? It sounds slightly Latinish.
It does sound Latin. It is Latin. Actually translates to wine, which isn't so exciting.
I could probably have guessed that.
Yeah, you might have done. You might have done. But it's a range that we've had for about 20 years, and Vinum was a separate tier from Radford Dale back in the day, and as of 2017 we brought it into Radford Dale. The goal really, if you look at our tiers, you've got the Radford Dale Terroir series, which is going to be sort of single vineyards or old vines or sites of real sort of special interest. And then we have a second label or a house label, the Winery of Good Hope. But what we've never had is a tier of wines that sort of sit right between the middle. And so these are very much drawing their inspiration from Radford Dale terroir vineyards. Very important components in these wines, but they're kind of geared up for that sort of by the glass listing. And
the accent I'm picking up, it's not really off the cast, doesn't sound terribly South African. What's the Tom Pryor wine story, the Tom Pryor South Africa story?
Yeah, I moved out here in 2013. Prior to that, I was living in London, but I'm from the east countryside of the UK, a place called Suffolk. And yeah, my previous career was in real estate out that way. And upon hitting 30 years old, I sort of had this epiphany that I wanted to do something else. And I'd been on holiday a few times to the Cape. As you know, you run into winemakers and see people in the industry, and I just kind of fell in love with it. And 10 years later, I'm still here, and I've been with Radford Dale for 4 years, and wine has really just kind of come on from there, really. I'm obsessed. And that's it. I'm now a permanent resident, and that's the goal.
Tell me a little bit more about the brand and the philosophy behind it.
The Radford Dale brand, I mean, we kicked off in 1998. Like a lot of the young independents we see today, it was rented cellar space. Alex Dale and Ben Radford sort of drawing, traveling the Cape, looking for sites of real interest and bringing it back to Stellenbosch base to vinify. And that was very much the model up to 2018. And in 2008, we had our head winemaker and viticulturist, Jacques de Klerk, join us. At that time, a young gun. Now he's also pushing 40, if not 40, like myself. And he's been there now 14 years. And that model carried on until 2018. Restaurant Rescue Project, it's been one of the success stories of the last couple of years, one of the few highlights of this, the challenges everyone's going through. Last year in October, we completed on the purchase of an organic wine farm in Elgin. And this represents the first winery and vineyards that we've had under ownership at Radford Dale. It's the next step up. We've always focused on, natural ferments and very sort of authentic wines and sort of low intervention winemaking. But, the has to come from, from the site and from how you're farming. So that's a really tremendously exciting time for us. And another highlight's really been this range, Vinum. We've had, to date, we've had the two wines, we call them the bookends, the Chenin Blanc Pinotage. And more recently with this 2021 release, under the new packaging, we've got some new wines in there. So we've got the Gamay Noir, a Grenache, a Pinot Noir, and a Chardonnay. So the wines are now sort of 6. And I think if you take these, this range in isolation, it really gives you the answer of what Radford Dale's all about. And, Radford Dale, until that point, has been a very excited winery. We work with fruit up in the Swartland, the Black Rock wine since 23. We've long championed the merits of Pinot Noir from Elgin. And our other sort of hunting ground is very much coastal Stellenbosch around the Polka Dry slopes, etc. But if you look at this range, we've got a Chenin Blanc, a Chardonnay, again, Alex's heritage. He grew up in Burgundy before moving out to the Cape, so he's very fanatical about those kind of wines. And then the other thing we're really is light, refreshing reds, and I think Gamay is kind of the epitome of that. So I brought along today Chenin Blanc, sort of our longest standing wine in this tier, and then a new Gamay.
Tell me what I'm getting in this wine. What makes it stand out for you?
Well, I mean, the first thing to know about this wine is, when I talk about how Radford Dale Vinum is sort of intrinsically linked to the terroir series, we have a site in the Polka Dry. Oh, that's quite loud. The wines are very linked. We've got a vineyard that we've worked with since 2008 in coastal Stellenbosch. We call it the Renaissance Vineyard. It's a vineyard that was planted in 1969, very much a heritage block. But it's quite a large single vineyard. It's about 4 hectares, and there's lots of slopes and different levels of topsoil and different amounts of foliage. So we do quite a few pickings of that site. And that wine supplies our Renaissance Chenin Blanc, our flagship, if you like. And it's quite indicative of what's been happening with Chenin Blanc. That vineyard, the fruit from that vineyard has been sold to a co-op, and it was quite dilapidated and not great. So the team led by Jacques, they rehabilitated that site over 5 years, and every year they learn something different about it. And so actually the core of this wine is also fruit coming from that Renaissance vineyard, so about 40%. And then there's a couple of other vineyards, one on the farm in Stellenbosch where we are, and another one on the Polka Dry Hills that we sort of combine. And that Renaissance component in this wine is also the component that's going into barrel, but fairly neutral barrels. Quite lazy winemaking. It sits in fairly neutral vessels for about 10 months. Sits there on the lease. We don't rack it off. But also not working it too hard. We're not much batonnage. We're looking for, particularly in this sort of coastal side of Stellenbosch, we're looking for sort of that citrus as a core. Maybe green fruit, but also, it's quite surprising just how filling and sort of leveled this wine is. It's coming in at 12% alcohol. That gives you a clue that we haven't adjusted that acid at a later date. It gives you a clue that we've done multiple pickings, and there's a lot going on. There's even a little portion of this wine that's a skin contact component. And so there we're looking again for that kind of texture, that kind of pithy character. And I think that's kind of how you define a little bit Polka Dry, that sort of green fruits. If you go over the hill into Bottleray, you're starting to see a bit more yellow fruit in the Chenins, and sometimes a bit more of a coating mouthfeel. And then I like to think of the Swartland as being more, as a sweeping statement, more around stone fruit and a salty character. And I think it's quite a nice way to sort of try and dig into the different styles.
It is one of our 2 wines. It's as you say, at 12% alcohol. Normally you'd expect, we're drinking red as well, that'll be far more alcohol, but it's not. In fact, it's 0.5% less, which is a style of wine I think we're seeing a lot more of, people making more lighter reds, and reds that are not the big heavy behemoths that we've often had in the past. And it is a grape we don't see a huge amount of.
the quieter side of Burgundy. Give me the Gamay story here.
Oof, I mean, I don't know how far back you want to go. We can start in the 14th century. I mean, Gamay is the grave of Beaujolais. Back in the 14th century, there was a Duke of Burgundy. I think his name was Philip the Bold. And he was looking at Burgundy and he decided he didn't like Gamay. So he famously labelled it as very bad and disloyal. And banished it further south to Beaujolais. And Beaujolais is administratively, admin-wise, it's part of Burgundy, but it's much closer to the Rhone. And it kind of ended up there, and and Beaujolais is becoming very trendy again. So I think since the financial crisis of 2008, particularly the European sommelier circuit, the American sommeliers, they've really driven home this idea of Beaujolais as a pairing, and of course, largely in part of bankers weren't going out for 10-course dinners anymore, and Burgundy prices were continuing to go through the roof. They were looking for another style, another kind of fresh, interesting wine. The paired menus, and we're starting to see that now. I think in the Cape, in Gauteng, commonly you'll see, if you're lucky enough to go for quite an eccentric 10-course pairing, you'll often see that big wine paired for the main dish. And Gamay is one of those varieties. It's a great drinking wine as well. It's a great pairing wine, but it's one of those wines that kind of invigorates the palate and keeps things going. In the Cape, the history is much more recent, but if you dial back to the 50s, 60s, it was fairly well planted in the Cape, in Stellenbosch. And of course, this kind of predates Pinot Noir finding a home in the Hemelanada and more recently Elgin. And producers like Marriott were blending it with Pinot Noir. Alphen had it with Cabernet, I think, in Pinot Noir. And you can imagine what it would lend to the blend. Very much like Cinsault, it would give that freshness, that acid, etc. So that's kind of the history, but for whatever reason, it lost favour. And I think today there are less than 10 hectares of Gamay remaining in the Cape. With Alex Dale coming out of Burgundy to South Africa in the late 90s, the first thing he wanted to do was continue importing his mate's wines, which included Burgundy and a pretty solid Beaujolais selection. When we discovered that there was some Gamay remaining in the Cape, he jumped on the chance to sort of salvage what remained of it, which I think there's 2 or 3 vineyards. And since 2014, we've had a wine called Thirst Gamay, which has been a lot of fun. It's got quite a quirky label, straight to tank, straight to bottle, smash it down. A vin soif, as the French would say. And then more recently in 2017, we released the Antidote Gamay Noir from the oldest block, I think 22 years old. And our attempt, I guess, at more of a village level wine, something a bit more serious, matured in Foudre. But again, there was this kind of gap. And, if the last 8 years have been about salvaging what remained of Gamay, then a few years ago, we also did something quite extraordinary. We also planted Gamay. So it's the first planting of Gamay in 20 years. And we found a wonderful farm in the Polkadry Hills to establish it, only half a hectare. That was in 2017, I think. And then a couple of years ago, we planted another almost half hectare of Gamay. So that's quite exciting for us. And if you look at the Polkadry, like Gruyère Arts would say, this is a vineyard by design. This is finally like a Gamay vineyard that kind of has been planted in a site that we believe has great potential for it. And if you look at the best spots in Beaujolais, in the northern side of Beaujolais, the cruise sites, they're all kind of situated on these granite-formed hills. And what do we have in the Cape? We have wonderful granite, and the Polkadry is a great idea. So, and for early ripening reds, the granite soils in the Polkadry are quite young, so it retains a lot of warmth. And then it's quite close to False Bay, so you've got that maritime influence. And we know that some great Syrahs coming out of there, like Sons of Sugarland, or some Cabernet Francs from Logrenberg. And we know that Chenin and Chardonnay works very well, ourselves and the Alights and the Cravens, for example. And so that's where we've identified some prospects for Gamay. We've been really thrilled by that vineyard to date. So this, as of 2021, is a 4-year-old Gamay vineyard. And so, if Chenin Blanc's now had a good run with Vinum, then this and the Grenache and the Pinot Noir, they're all about potential, and what's next. More excitingly than that, we've also, this will now serve as the mother block. We're going to take material from this vineyard, and later this year we'll be planting it on the new farm in Elgin. So, hopefully in a few years we'll have an organic Elgin Gamay Noir. And later than that, we hope to be able to supply other producers. There's a lot of interest from peers, and I think, this drinking trend and style is coming back towards strained alcohol, fresh red wines, and we've always loved those, but it seems to be now coming forward. So this is the next part of our Gamay project.
That's driving the Radford Dale story. You've had an exclusive audience with wine history professor Tom Pryor running us through the Radford Dale story, the Venom. I think most exciting the Gamay. There's a good chance you've never had Gamay before, or certainly not knowingly. Seek it out, give it a try. It's a little slice of quiet Burgundy in South Africa, and it's in very good hands, the team at Radford Dale. So the wines of Radford Dale, thanks to Tom Pryor, seriously cool guy with a lovely story which mirrors the wine he was presenting. Not just a great story to the wine, but some real quirkiness and doing some fun and some exciting stuff, which in fairness speaks to a lot of our winemakers, but whenever we do encounter it on the show, which is fairly often, it is really, really cool to see. And the fact they did so much work to support our restaurants is another good reason to support their wine, on top of the fact that it's pretty good stuff. So too is the food at the Shortmarket Club. If you haven't been yet, Luke Dale Roberts at his finest. The food is pretty good. In fact, I'm going off to check out the restaurant and to see how Tahir and his team are going at the Marriott, and I'll also have, as another option if I wanted, just across the road, the Grill House, which is somewhere Dan really likes wine, spends rather a lot of time. But now, big thank you to Erika Obermeyer and to the team here at the Marriott, as well as to Tom and the Radford Dale guys. Keep drinking and supporting South African wine. I'll see you back again next week on Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick n Pay. Goodbye.